Hello, welcome to this game review. We'll have a look at a game from the Alpine Sicilian, where we got a standard hanging pawn structure and the black did not handle it very well. Well, white played pretty well, though later everything changed after a few blunders. So let's take a look. Started as d4. So this is the Smith-Morra gambit, but one of the ways to play against it is to transpose to the Alpine after knight f6. Here white basically has to play e5, and then we get the Alpine with knight f6. So the normal move order would be like this, and now after d4 cd we get the same position. So here with cd was played e6. So here black has a few ways to play, either with either with e6 or without e6. The main move is usually d6 and then taking one way or another, but e6 is also fine. Here we will develop this bishop to b7 importantly, because this diagonal is now closed. Knight f3, d6, this is fine. White takes, which lets black develop more easily, and here we get an IQP type of position, which normally may transpose to an hanging pawn structure, as it happened here. Black took. And now it's important to understand how black should develop his pieces. In general, the best setup would be like this. The bishop goes to b7, the knight goes to d7, and the rooks go to c8 and d8. And then we play against the c4 square and the c3 pawn as well. So black castles. He puts his knight on d7. Next he plays knight f6, which is already a bit of a mistake. It's not clear where this knight belongs. Well, probably it will go to f6 eventually, but at the moment it's doing a good job defending the e5 square. And also, in general, in the opening, we should first strive to develop the pieces. We do not want to place them perfectly if it takes us a lot of time. So this knight has already moved. Next we have to make sure this bishop gets developed, also the queen and the rooks. So b6 is screaming to be played. And for example, if white develops somehow, we can put the queen on c7, the bishop on b7, and this is considered a very good version of the hanging pawns for black. Next he can play rook c8, perhaps maneuver the knight eventually to d5 somehow, and he should have a pretty stable small advantage. Knight f6. Now white is allowed to develop more actively. h6, then rook e8. And again, black clearly has issues with his queen side. He really has to develop the queen side. There's no way around this, but there's something like rook e8 is kind of a useless move. The rook doesn't really do anything on e8. We're not really preparing e5 while we have no developed pieces. So again, black should just move the queen and place the bishop somewhere. This isn't too scary. Black should be able to defend on the dark squares. So rook e8, knight e5. Now white is attacking, and in general white has a little bit more space in this structure, so it makes sense for him to use the squares that he has to start some kind of attack. a5 is a very strange move. Again, black should somehow develop, maybe queen c7, though at this point this is already a lot more dangerous. For example, black can get checked, and here even f4 is an interesting option to sacrifice the knight but open the rook, the bishop, and black is completely undeveloped, and surprisingly white is close to winning here. So this is one example, but there are other moves as well. But a5 is a complete waste of time, and also it weakens the position. This doesn't develop any pieces. Black should again try to at least play b6 or bishop d7 or something similar. But a5, queen f3, rook b8, again too slow. We have to deal with the threats on the king side already. And now black will be a bit worse because white has the initiative, since black still hasn't developed the pieces. Rook b8, knight g4, bishop b7. And here white plays rook fe1, which allows black to get rid of some tension. White could have gotten an advantage by exchanging stuff. And then this bishop b5 move is quite annoying. Firstly, black has to move the rook to f8, and then apparently there's a very nice tactic like this, and queen g3, using the undefended rook on b. But apart from this concrete variation, there are other moves as well for white. but this blunders some exchanges, and now black shouldn't get checkmated. And again, what is black's problem? His undeveloped queenside. He has to just move the bishop. Again, this bishop is not necessarily ideally placed, but at least it connects the rook. It allows our rooks to start playing somehow, and finally the pieces are developed. But black decides to move around with the queen by just attacking some pawn. Clearly white doesn't care about this. Now he blunders with g6. He had to play f5, which is clearly not a move that we would want to make, weakening the dark squares. And at this point white is doing very well, but black should be able to hold on objectively as he has finally developed his pieces. But g6, queen f4, unfortunately this is a 4, and now white is close to winning. Queen c3 happened, again moving around with the queen. He should try to defend. But after this, white could win rather simply by sacrificing the bishop here. And here this doesn't really require much calculation. We can see that next the rook can come to e3, and these two pieces will give checkmate. Well, rook c1 as well at some point, and this should be winning for white quite easily, one way or another, as black still hasn't gotten counterplay and his king is completely open. But bishop e4 is played, and bishop d7, and again this is white's last chance to sacrifice the bishop, and again this would be a winning position. For example, rook a d1, next move is rook e3, and the white is just slowly checkmating. Not even slowly, but there's not really much to do for black. Rook ac1 played, but now the black queen is in time to defend here. So now black is a bit better with his pawn advantage, and from here black played pretty well. He activated his pieces, he took the a2 pawn, rook goes to b8, h4, but now black is the one attacking, a4, and black is a pawn up. He has this passed pawn on the a file, and importantly he finds this very good move, queen h4, pinning the h pawn, after which he will win another pawn, and from here it should be rather simple. Here rook b8 was played, but probably a bit more technical is rook a8 to put the rook behind the passed pawn. Next is queen h5, and every rook endgame will be completely winning for black. But okay, this is fine. Eventually white ran out of counterplay, though here rook a7 was played, which blunders a decent, well, simple tactic by white. Again, white should try to find the tactics in his games. He should look for captures, checks, attacks, and here rook a3. It's a nice move. Point being that next move is queen f8, and the rook will be taken again with an equal position. But here the position is still winning for black, though a few moves later, as we will see, again it was misplayed. Here queen c5 was played, which is a very bad move. It's hard to understand, as before we offer a queen exchange we have to consider the queen exchange. Here white should and has to just take, because now he wins the a2 pawn, and this 3-on-2 rook endgame should be drawn, though of course there's still some play left. But this is clearly white's only chance. It's hard to understand how this could be missed, especially when white has no alternatives basically. But queen b2. Now again queen d4, this just gives up the pawn in one move, which white doesn't take, which is hard to understand. Perhaps this was some time pressure. Queen c1, and from here black managed to win by bringing his king a little bit, and at this point white lost on time, though the position is winning. The most simple way to win is probably to put the rook on a4 eventually, and then try to promote the pawn, or maybe just queen b1 or something like this. So kind of an interesting game. The opening and the middle game was played quite poorly, but both sides in the endgame, I assume the blunders were due to time pressure. But here it's important to know how to put your pieces in the hanging pawn structure. That's one thing worth taking away from.